Anyway, this week's episode is going to be on South America, and Liam, I'm sure that you'll have watched plenty of South American football over the past few months. You know, with your consultancy work, there is always a gem to be mined in the South American leagues, and I'm not just talking about Brazil's Brasileira or Argentina's Primera Division. There are players everywhere in Ecuador, Colombia, Paraguay, Uruguay. All the countries that perhaps don't get discussed as often when talking about South American football. It's been home to some of the greatest players ever to grace the beautiful game. Leonidas, Garrincha, Pele, Socrates, Ronaldo, Kaká. Throughout the years, they've been fantastic at World Cups. And then of course, Maradona, Valdano, Ardiles, Kempes, Batistuta, and of course, Messi from Argentina. They're of course the big two. But on this episode, we are going to hear it for the little guy as well, the smaller nations, as I've just discussed, because they have equally produced their fair share of global stars as well. And there'll be a bit of both. We'll draw on some Brazilian and Argentine talents as well. But I think one of the things that struck me, Lee, when we were doing sort of our background for this and we shared notes was that, we didn't pick any of the same players. And sometimes that is the case in Europe because, the hype surrounding a player in Europe can be so, suffocating that it's almost impossible to not get wrapped up in it. But with South America, I feel like there are so many competitions for a start. So by default, there are so many players to discuss, and the fact that we didn't cross paths in that sense is a good sign, I think.
I think so. I think that you're right. The depth of quality of talent in South America is still very much there. There's so much different types of players and different styles of football within South America as a continent that there's so much for you to choose from depending on what kind of profile of player you want to go for. I think it is noteworthy that we've picked four players each, and I don't think there's a defender amongst them. I think that's just part of South American football. You're naturally drawn to the kind of attacking output because games there can be so open. I mean, the Copa Libertadores is one of my very favourite tournaments. I watch as much of it as I can, and that is from an enjoyment standpoint more possibly than a scouting or consulting standpoint because the games can be so open and so interesting. More from an individual player point of view sometimes than from a tactical point of view. I think that the early stages of the Libertadores especially are fantastic when you get some of the smaller, lesser known teams that are playing some of the bigger teams in South America, and you see some crazy sights along with some exciting, exhilarating football. I think that part of what makes South America so interesting from a young player development and from a scouting point of view is that there's so much disparity in terms of socio-economic status in different countries, different regions of these countries, different cities, where these players are growing up. Some of them are growing up in middle class backgrounds more often now. You're seeing that in Argentina, especially. You're seeing players breaking through who perhaps have come from wealthier backgrounds, but there are still the other side of that coin. There's still the players like the Maradonas who grow up in the barrios, who grow up playing cage football, street football, and South American players so often, especially in an attacking sense, have that bit of the devil around them. The type of thing you saw from Carlos Tevez, from Sergio Aguero has it. There are numerous different examples throughout the continent of players who've came to Europe and achieved fame and glory and in football and success who have that edge. I think, of course, Luis Suarez is maybe the poster boy for that at the moment, but we all know about his combative edge that he has, and he's always shown it throughout his career. And I think sometimes European teams covet that from South American players because in Europe, players tend to develop through youth academies where everything's kind of given to them and laid out. They play on nice green pitches. They have the very best equipment. They have the best modes of transport to get to games, at least at the higher levels. And I think there's something to be said for taking in a young player who hasn't had that and has that desire and hunger to kind of prove himself and prove everybody wrong. I think that's always been an interesting aspect of recruitment from South America.
Yeah, I think there definitely has to be a disparity because growing up in those different socioeconomic backgrounds, it's fundamentally going to produce a different person. It always does. Never mind a different football player, which is one of the greatest modes of outward expression. That a young talented player can have. That may often be the only form of outward expression that player has, that person has. So naturally, he's going to throw up lots of different characters on the pitch as well as off it. So I mean, just before we get into sort of the individuals, I mean, those looking through Europe's major leagues, and you look at see how many South Americans there are in Europe, and I think before the transfer window in January, there were 25 Brazilians in the Premier League, which was the fourth most common nationality, which surprised me somewhat. I mean, I knew there were a fair share, but 25 kind of caught me by surprise. That's just over one per team, which I think is quite an outlier. By comparison, there's only 10 Brazilians in the Bundesliga, a similar amount in La Liga, 21, but then 37 Brazilian players in Serie A, which
Yep.
again caught me by surprise. Serie A, though, I'm sort of more aware that there are more South American players, but to the extent of 28 Argentinians and 12 Uruguayans as well, I was quite taken aback by the fact that this has just been something which I was loosely aware of, but not to the same extent. It was something which kind of caught me by surprise. And then you kind of go into you delve a little bit deeper and you look at certain clubs and their recruitment. So for say Ajax, for example, they've scouted South America and they've scouted it really well in recent times. All you need to look at is like David Neres and Anthony coming from the Sao Paulo route, Lisandro Martinez from Defensa y Justicia in Argentina, Nico Tagliafico from Independiente, and of course Davinson Sanchez before he moved on to Spurs was at Ajax as well, but he signed from Atletico Nacional in Colombia. So they've got quite a breadth there that they've covered.